Today I'm going to teach you some basic colour theory that will help you with your permanent makeup services. So anything to do with brows, whether it's ombre, microblading or combination or nano, I'm going to help you understand the basics of colour theory. I'm Natalie and I'm a sponsored artist for Colour Beauty. Let's get stuck in. One of the biggest struggles is trying to figure out which pigment is suitable for which client. So in order for us to choose the right pigment, we need to understand colour theory. Now, colour theory for permanent makeup is totally different to like the basic colour theory, but some of the principles still remain the same. So I really like to get my students to understand the colours in the pigment bottles and how they are made up. In permanent makeup, we need to understand colour theory to choose the right pigment for our clients. So we need to understand colour theory in relation to what's inside this pigment bottle. And then we also need to understand colour theory so we can check the skin and undertones so we can choose the right pigment to put into our client's skin. Now, in this pigment bottle, we have our pigment powder, which is the coloured powder, and then we have the carrying agent, which is the liquid. We have a binder, which coagulates everything, brings everything together, and then we have the solvents, which preserves it. That's what's inside our pigment bottle. And the thing that we need to be aware of are the colours, the coloured pigment powders that go into the pigment bottle. So I'm going to show you how to understand how the colours are made up in our pigment bottle by showing you how to mix up the colours, okay? One of the teaching tools that I use during my training courses for my students is this colour wheel. Now you can get this from Amazon, and this is really helpful to be able to determine what hue the colour is. Also to understand the value of the pigment, and also to understand what adding a tint to a pigment will do, and also the shade of a pigment. So firstly, we're going to start off with, say, for example, a red. If we have a red colour, and we add black to it, that is going to make a shade of red, and it is going to darken the value. As you can see here, we've got the value. 1 is black and 10 is, say, white. So 1 is the darkest and 10 is the lightest. So if we keep adding lots of black to this red, we're going to darken the value. I'm going to show you a demonstration of what I mean. Okay, so we have a red with an orange hue, and we're going to add some black to it. So the value of this red is probably a value 3. Now we want to make it a value 2. So we want to make the red darker in value. So we're going to add black to the red to darken the value. And you only need a little bit, and you can see the value of the red now becomes a 2, not quite black. To darken the value, you are going to use a darker colour, and when you add black to a colour, that is a shade. Now I am going to make a tint of red by adding white. So the red was a value 3, and we're lightening the value of the pigment here, or the paint, by adding the white. We've made it a nice pinky colour, and you can see the value has shifted from a 3 and it's now more of a, I would say, value 6. If we added more white, we can shift the value, and we're more now a value, I would say 8. So to lighten the value, we are going to add a light colour, and to darken the value, we are going to add a dark colour. And that's important because we want to be able to identify the skin, what colour the skin is on this value scale, and we want to identify what colour the pigment is on this value scale. We would never use a dark black pigment into white skin because the contrast would be too great. We would never add a pigment with a value 7 into my skin because we wouldn't have a contrast. So understanding the importance of value is very important when considering permanent makeup. So here we have some popular colours from the Permablend collection, and I'm going to place them on the value scale so you can start to see how the pigments fit on the scale. So here we have brown suede, and I'm going to put that as value 2. That's going to be here. It's not quite black, but it's definitely dark in value. So here we have ready medium, and I'm going to put that on the value scale 4. Here we've got dark Java, that's going to be 3. Dark fig, I would say that is going to be value 2. And then this one is a blonde pigment, ready blonde, and I would say this is value 6. So you can see different pigments have different values. Here along the colour wheel, we have our warmer colours, which go from your warm red down to red orange, orange, yellow orange and yellow. Or we can have our cooler colours, which are going red violet, violet, blue violet down to blue, blue green, and then our greens and yellow greens and yellow are kind of our more neutral colours. So here I've done drawdowns of ready blonde, ready medium and ready dark. Now you can see that this is a white piece of paper and it has a black strip. Now the black strip is going to help us identify if the pigment is opaque or sheer. Now opaque means how much coverage this has. You can imagine, you can liken this to a tinted foundation or a full coverage foundation. A tinted moisturiser is very sheer. You can see the skin through the tinted moisturiser and it's very sheer, it has less coverage. Whereas a full coverage foundation is very opaque. You're not going to be able to see any of the imperfections through the full coverage foundation. So here will help us identify whether the pigment is opaque, like the level of opacity. So you can see here we've got, and it will also help us understand what the undertone of the pigment is. All the pigments are brown, but they're different values of brown. So we have a very, very light brown, like a taupe colour. This is ready blonde. And it does have quite high opacity. And the reason for that is we want to be able to see the pigment and it needs to be able to show up in the skin because it's quite a light brown colour. Then we have ready medium. Now the ready medium is still quite opaque, so I would definitely say medium opacity. And we have the dark Java, again, it has medium opacity. So all three pigments have medium opacity, and we can tell this by looking at the black strip when we do our drawdowns. We can now have a look at the undertone of the pigment. We find the undertone by looking at the bottom of our drawdown. Remember to always dip the cotton bud in some water, and that will help you be able to see the undertone when you're doing your drawdowns. Ready Blonde, we've established that it's got medium opacity. We've established that it is a light brown pigment, light in value, and if we take our colour wheel, we can try and identify the undertone of the pigment. We can see that it's a yellowy orange, and this is a warm undertone that it has. Always keep one of these on hand. It's really important that you check with your colour wheel if you're finding any difficulty in identifying the undertone of your client's skin or of the pigment. Okay, so we're going to look at Ready Medium. Ready Medium, we know it's medium in value. We know that it's medium opacity, and we know that this is not very warm, it's quite neutral in the undertone. Now we're going to Dark Java, and we know that this is dark in value. It has medium opacity because we can see the pigment over the black strip, and we know that it's leaning towards a warmer colour. So it has a warm undertone. To help you understand what is in the pigment bottles, remember I spoke about the powders that are mixed with the wet ingredients, the carriers, the liquid. We are going to make this colour with the colours that are actually in this bottle. So each colour in a pigment bottle has a CI code. Now you can check the reference. Just go on Google and you'll be able to check what colour that CI code is. Now, I'm going to mix the CI codes that are in Ready Blonde to make this colour using paint. We have titanium dioxide, we have organic 138, we have organic 170, which is a cool red, and then we have a very small amount of carbon black. Now I'm going to mix these colours together, and we should be able to get a similar colour to Ready Blonde. So here we've mixed all the pigments together, and you can see we have a colour that is nearly the same as Ready Blonde. Ready Medium contains some carbon black, a warm 254 red, a cool 170 red, yellow 138, and some titanium dioxide. So we're attempting to make Ready Medium with the paint. So I'm going to mix all this together. Here's the Ready Medium that we have just made up. And here's Dark Java. So I'm using titanium dioxide, carbon black, a warm red, a cool red, and a yellow. And I'm going to make the Dark Java. So mix all this together. Here's Dark Java that we've made up using the different coloured paints. The pigments that I've used all contain titanium dioxide and carbon black in varying amounts. Now, Ready Blonde contains a very minuscule amount of carbon black. As you can see, it's very light in value. But why do we put the carbon black in here and the titanium dioxide? So why do we put the white in here and the black in here? So as you know, we want to be able to darken the value of this pigment, and that's the reason why it doesn't just contain the reds, the yellows, and the oranges. If we don't add the black, then we are not going to be able to get a brown colour. Adding the reds, the yellow, the white, and the black helps us to make a brown colour. Now, the less black we add, the lighter in value. The more white we add, the lighter the value, but also the more opaque the pigment will be. If we don't have a pigment with opacity, then it's going to be like a sheer foundation. So it's going to be like a tinted moisturizer, and we're not going to be able to see that in the skin. We need to have some coverage, so when the skin heals over the top, we can actually see that colour in the skin. And here you can see I've added some more black, so carbon, and then we have darkened the value of the pigment. So if we don't add black or white to the pigment, then we are going to have too sheer of a formula. Now, this is where things get complicated. When we add the titanium dioxide to the pigment, it has the highest strength, and so does carbon black. So they are going to last in the skin longer than any of the other colours. So the red, the yellow will fade, and the oranges will fade, and the black and the white will remain behind. And it's important to understand that the white and the black will remain in the skin. When the reds and the oranges and the yellows fade, you will find that the carbon black will remain in the skin, and that will appear to be cooler in the skin. So if you see ashy coloured brows like the greys and the blues, that is the carbon black that's been left behind in the skin. Now, down the line, a great way to remove this out of the skin is you can do laser treatment or you can do a removal. Now we know about the pigment colours, we know that we need to consider the value of the colour, so how light or dark the pigment is. We need to consider the undertone of the pigment, so what colour we can see. Is it warm? Is it cool? And then we need to be able to consider the opacity of the pigment. So is it sheer? Does it have full coverage? And then we also need to be checking for the client's skin colour and the undertone of the skin. So if I was choosing a pigment for myself, I'd have a look at my skin and I would check the value of my skin. I'm going to say that I am around between a 4 and a 3, maybe a 3. I know that if I choose a pigment that has a value of the same as my skin, then it's not going to show up. So I need to be able to have a contrast. So the value of the pigment is going to have to be darker. So that's the first thing we consider. Then I'm going to check the undertone of my skin. So here you can see that I have more green, so that is neutral. If you can see very, 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 very cool, if you can see blue, then you know you're going to need a very warm pigment. So as you can see, the veins that we can see through are cool, meaning that Laura has a cooler undertone than I have. When I'm working with organic-based pigments, I want to always ensure that I am warming up the pigment that is going into the skin. And I always do this by using a modifier. So we have two different types of modifiers. We can have modifiers that contain titanium dioxide, which is the white, which has a more opaque coverage. And then we have modifiers that don't contain titanium dioxide. They are more sheer. So here we can look at the yellow correctors and toner. So we have the Limoncello corrector and we have the Golden Pear toner, both yellow. One is sheer, less coverage, more like a tinted moisturizer, and one is more opaque, like a full coverage foundation. And if we are looking at Pretty Penny toner and Golden Hour, again, we can see that we have the more opaque, which is in the Golden Hour, and the less opaque, which doesn't have any titanium dioxide, which is the white. And this is the one I usually go for, the toners or the pigments that don't contain any titanium dioxide to modify with. Another example is the Navel Orange and the Orange Peel. Navel Orange contains titanium dioxide and Orange Peel does not contain titanium dioxide. If I was to choose a pigment for myself, I would go for Dark Java. I'd probably want to darken the value a little bit, so I may use a Ready Dark pigment or Ebony from Tina Davis, and then I will always modify my pigments when I'm working with melanin rich skin, even if there's a neutral undertone there, because when I'm working with organic pigments as well, I don't want them to heal too ashy. So I would probably use Orange Peel, and that way they would heal beautiful and they would age beautiful. Thanks for watching, and if you want to keep in touch, then give me a follow on Instagram. It is badgal.brows. Also, if you like this video, do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to Killer Beauty.